Okay, now because the displayed text is and the highlights is relatively boring, I'm going to show you just a couple of changes you could make in the CSS files so that the text will be more interesting. I could use Dreamweaver or any other editor, including just the text editor, but I'm going to use a program I'm afraid only available on the Mac called Espresso. Now, I'm going to show page 2, and I'll just preview that page and drag it out. You can see, generally pretty boring stuff. The reason I quite like Espresso is because it's a very good editor, but also in this case it'll show me the live changes as they're applied without me having to make any button presses. So I'm now going to go to the CSS directory for this page, which is 2. CSS2. Okay. And you can see there's 2 panels here. I'm on each in the left hand panel. And what I want to do is I want to apply some text to the entire document initially. And what I'll be doing first and foremost is editing the CSS to create a body style. And I'll just do this like this. So this applies to all the text in the main body of the document. And I'll create a position, absolute, and I'll create a width, which would be the same width as the viewport, which would be 512 pixels wide. And the height would be, let me quick check out, 768 pixels, 22 point career. Still a little large, but I'll live with it. And I'd also like to land the text centered rather than left hand margin. I'll do text align. Let's put some colon there. Text align, and I'll make it center. Okay, so you can see now that the text is centered. I'd quite like to do something specific to All the World's a Stage by Will Shakespeare, effectively the title. So how do I do that? Well, if I go back to the XHTML for page 2, All the World's a Stage by William Shakespeare has a reference. It has 2 references. It has an L1 reference and a W1 reference. I'm going to show you how to use the W1 reference in this case. Although I could show you how to do the L1 if I wish. So I want this text to be, for instance, colour blue and a larger font. For example, I'm going to use the reference in there, W1, and I'm going to reference that in the CSS. So you reference W1 with a hash W1. And again, curly brackets, and then I'll just change the font size. So I'll say font is 32 point, and make it Korean, and also that the color is blue, for example, color blue. There we go. Okay, so I've made what I think are appropriate changes, and I'll just doesn't matter about the spacings, but make it look similar to the line above. Nothing's changed with the title page, and the reason for that is if we go back to the XHTML file, you can see that the W1 is a capital W, and if I look at what I've typed in, it's referencing a lowercase w. Okay, sensitivity, by now W, there you go. All the words staged in blue, larger letters, the rest of the text from the body, which is font 22, and is being centered. Okay, so I'd like to now do something interesting with page 3. Get rid of that. Let's go to page 3. If you remember the Edgar Allan Poe poem, and this is again very boring. With this, I'm going to change the zoom to be 200% so that when each word is spoken, the text, each word in this case, will be double in size. And then when it moves on to the next word, that word will double in size and the previous word will go back to its normal size. Again, if I go to page 2, I'm going to grab the body, do something with that. What I'd like to do in this case is first and foremost change the main header. So I'll go back to page 2 and just grab W1 entry, W1 entry. It's out there. Oh, now that's interesting. What's going on there? Well, I guess I'm going to have to do this for every single word. So, page 2. Don't really want to do that. So, is there a way that I can reference all of the Annabelle Lee by Edgar Allan Poe? Good news is there is. If I go to page 3, you can see that the Annabelle Lee by Edgar Allan Poe is referenced each word with a W1, W2 to W6 reference for span ID. There's also a class called L1. What I'd like to do is reference the whole of L1, and pretty straightforward. I change this to L1 instead of W1, and instead of a hash, you reference a class with a dot. There you go. I believe Edgar Allan Poe. What I'd like to do now is create this text, slightly different font would be nice, but more importantly, I quite like it to be a diagonal line as it goes from the next line to the next line. So what I'd like to do here is create a .L2 reference, and if I again go to page 3, you can see that each line represented by a class. So by the sea is where this ends. United Kingdom by the sea, and then L3, that's a maiden, and L4, and this maiden. So what I'm going to do is create an L2 entry, and this time I'm going to have a position absolute, and then I'm going to move the text down to the right. So I'm going to move it left, say 50 pixels, and then I'll make it from the top, I'll make it say 200 pixels, and then I'll create one for L3 and L4, 2, 3, and 4. So each of them I'll increment to the right and down. So the first one was 50 and 200, then I'll make it 100 to 300, 300, and finally 150, I think incremented in 50s, and then another 100 to 400. And I guess I could also do something for the Annabelle Lee. I could make that an absolute. Sorry. I can make that position absolute, and I could move it, say, from the left 100 pixels. Here we go. So L1 refers to this line, and I've simply made it 32 point blue, and I've moved it from the left 100, and then each subsequent line I simply move from the left an extra 50 pixels, 50, 100, 150, and then down from the top 100 for the first line, 200, 300, 400, just to give some structure to the code. So I'm going to save that and quit. I now need to recreate my EPUB, I could obviously check the EPUB, but I'm just going to recreate the EPUB. I'm overwriting it, so yes, I replace it. Fire up iBooks and drag my new reformatted EPUB, replace it. First page has been no changes. You can see now that we have blue headers here. This one is centered and this one was moved in by from the left 100 pixels. Then the rest of this poem was simply centered with a slightly different font. On this one, I didn't actually change the font, but I moved it down and to the right. And if I again try and read that.
All the world's the stage.
Remember, the first poem is 100% zoom.
All the world's the stage.
I
And
know
all the
zoom.
men.
But the
His
second
hours
poem,
been 7 ages. It
it's
was
got 200%
many
zoom.
and many a year ago in a.
So you can see that because we have a zoom of 200% in the CSS, that the word kingdom is twice as large as normal, but the previous word which has been spoken has moved back to its normal size when it moved on to the next word.